Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got exiled and unlocked a power to change the galaxy? Part 1. Huge shout out to kyuubi no Goku for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. The final judgment was made as Naruto stared out with nothing but horror in his eyes as the judge declared him guilty of trying to murder that emo bastard Sasuke. During the retrieval mission when he had finally caught up with Sasuke at Valley of the End, Sasuke had made it clear that he didn't want to come back to Konoha and he would come back unless he was forced to. Naruto had no other choice but to fight him and beat the crap out of him in order to bring him back. It wasn't his fault that he was forced to use a kyuubi enhanced Rasengan to make sure that Sasuke would remain still on their trip back to Konoha. As soon as he had entered the gates covered with blood that was his and Sasuke's, the Anbu had immediately come and taken Sasuke away, while Sakura had yelled at him about how she had asked him to bring back Sasuke, not try to kill him. After she had screamed out how she hated him and never wanted to see him again and ran off after Sasuke, another pair of Anbu came and told him he was to appear before the council at once. He wasn't even allowed to go to the hospital for treatment first, not that they would have treated him anyways. Once he had gone up to the Hokage tower and into the council chambers, he was immediately accused of attempted murder of a fellow Konoha shinobi, with said shinobi being the one we all love to hate, Sasuke. He had seen the many looks of disgust and hate on almost each and every one of the council members' faces. He had tried to defend himself against the charges, however it was futile at best, especially with the amount of bias against him. Tsunade, who was also there, tried to defend him against the charges, but it was to no avail. The council had simply assumed too much power during the time it took for Tsunade to be convinced to come back and become the new Hokage. Every time she tried to point out something good about Naruto, the council would just come up with some outlandish tale to counter it. Tsunade was, however, able to get the council to lower their greatly wanted execution of Naruto to a banishment order. As the self-appointed speaker of the council, civilian and shinobi halves, Iko Haruno, no one tried to stop her from claiming her position for fear that their eardrums would burst, proclaimed with a sneer, "Demon, you have until midnight to pack up your things and leave." Many of the council members from both halves looked at Naruto with smirks, happy that the demon that they hated for so long was one step closer to having its life cut short. Sure, they were only banishing him, but later on they could always hire assassins to come after the boy and finish him off. It wouldn't be too hard either, especially now that his dream to be Hokage was broken. At first Naruto simply wasn't able to believe what he was hearing. It soon sunk in, however, that he was banished for a crime that he was being falsely accused of by the very village he had sworn to protect. Soon, Naruto began to grow angry, and as he did so he felt that same power start rising up inside of him. It was like the kyuubi's chakra, only it felt far more powerful and evil. "Kill them," a voice whispered in the back of his head. However, Naruto tried to immediately push that same power away. He already remembered what had happened the last time he had used it and it wasn't pretty. He especially didn't want to use that power and give the council the final bits of fuel needed in order to execute him. As he left the council chamber, Iko purposely let him hear her next words. Furthermore, the law made by the Sandaime Hokage about speaking of the kyuubi's status is no longer in effect. So my fellow council members, let us now spread about the truth about the kyuubi to the younger generation and let them learn of the dangers of that demon brat. Tsunade and Naruto's eyes widened at what she said, and Tsunade immediately jumped up and said, "What the hell, you can't do that, only the Hokage has the right to change the laws of a previous Hokage, and there is no way I'm gonna let you tucking bastards tell anyone about Naruto and the kyuubi." Iko merely smirked at Swan and retorted, "Oh, but I can, and I have, you see we of the council now have more power than even you Lord Hokage. All you really are is just a formality that we need to keep around so that we can keep appearances up. After all, this still is one of the 5 great hidden villages, so it wouldn't do if we had no Kage." After that Iko snapped her fingers making Anbu appear all around. Iko smirked and said, "Now, unless you want to find yourself injured to the point of no return, I suggest that you shut up and go along with whatever I say." Just as Tsunade was about to go and start yelling at the Haruno's impudence, Naruto spoke up, "It's okay Bachan, let her do what she wants." When Tsunade and Iko heard his defeated tone, there were two completely different emotions running through them. While Tsunade felt her heart break upon hearing Naruto speak in such a defeated voice, Iko felt pure joy at hearing the sorrow in Naruto's voice. "See, even the demon brat agrees with me, so I suppose there's nothing more you can do Tsunade," Iko said in a mocking voice. Tsunade grit her teeth and gave out a soft "damn it" before deciding to get Naruto out of the room. Grabbing Naruto, Tsunade shunshined out of the room and into her office. Knowing that Naruto was still injured, if the dripping blood was any indication, Tsunade started to heal him at once. As she was healing him, Jiraiya came into the office through the window. Tsunade, I just heard what people are saying the council did to Naruto. Have they really done it? Have they really banished him? When Jiraiya finally noticed that Naruto was also in the room and was now even more depressed than previously, Tsunade glared at him and said, if I wasn't healing Naruto right about now, I'd beat the crap out of you for being so insensitive. Sorry, I didn't know he was in the room, but seriously, have they really banished Naruto? How do you even know about that? Only a few minutes have passed since they decided to do that. Well, the council came out of the Hokage tower and immediately started shouting out at the top of their lungs about how they had banished the demon brat. I didn't believe them, but now that you've apparently confirmed it, it seems as though they finally won. Jiraiya said this with a sad look in his eyes. He looked at Naruto and asked, so Gaki, what are you gonna do now? Naruto, who had his head hanging down in depression, spoke in a low voice, I don't know, Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya and Tsunade's eyes widened when they heard him call Jiraiya that. Naruto slowly raised his head to show that tears were coming out of his eyes. He then asked in a desperate voice, what am I gonna do? All I've ever wanted to be was Hokage, but now I can't do that. How can I change how the villagers see me now, huh? Jiraiya looked with pity in his eyes and said, Naruto, I don't think you can. Naruto looked at him with shock, while Tsunade exploded, what'd mean he can't? Naruto is the most kind-hearted boy out there, he's been nothing but good to all of those ungrateful villagers. So how is it that he can change their minds? Hell, he changed my mind about being Hokage, so what's stopping him from doing the same with them? Tsunade got a bit hysterical at the end of her rant. Jiraiya then said, I think the reason Naruto can't change their minds is because they're just too enveloped in their hate. Most of the villagers lost at least one person of importance to them the night Kyuubi attacked, and while I think it's unreasonable how the villagers keep blaming you for their misfortunes, there's simply nothing you can do about it. I guess they've just hated you for so long that it's next to impossible for them to think about you without anger coming out. So what you're saying is that I should just give up trying to change their minds about me? Naruto asked, slightly angry. Jiraiya said in response, yes, in fact I really don't know why you keep trying to gain their favor at all. They've done nothing but treat you like crap, yet you still try to make them happy. Jiraiya sighed before continuing, Gaki, I think you would have a much better life away from Konoha than in it. Naruto tried for one last protest but was quickly stopped by Jiraiya and a reluctant Tsunade. As Naruto was finally forced to accept that he was being banished, Jiraiya went to Naruto's apartment to gather whatever belongings Naruto would be able to carry. It was almost midnight by the time Naruto was walking towards the gates that would lead him out of the hellhole known as Konoha. He carried a backpack with him that had an assortment of items that he would need in order to survive outside Konoha. There was nothing in the backpack that came from his apartment at all, seeing as how it had been burned down by the villagers in their frenzy upon hearing news of the demon being banished and the law that the Sandaime made no longer in effect. Word had spread like wildfire to everyone who hadn't known about Naruto's Conditio thanks to Ico Banshee powers. Once all of his friends in the Rookie 9 and Team 10 heard about it, he had received various reactions from them. Some like Neji, Tenten, Lee, Guy and Shikamaru had been understanding of Naruto and had stayed loyal to him. Others had been less than pleasant to him once they learned. Sakura had been extremely vicious to him once she had heard about Naruto being the Jinchuriki of the kyuubi. She made things quite clear that she never wanted to see a freak like him ever again. Ino had been almost as bad as Sakura, while Choji and Kiba all blatantly said that if they ever saw him again they'd kill him. Shino had empathized with Naruto and treated him no differently than he had before. Hinata, who was usually a kind-hearted soul, said things that would have caused even Hiashi to faint. She had yelled at Naruto's haters about how they should treat Naruto has every right to release the kyuubi to destroy the village. Hinata then turned to Naruto-kun, when I become the Hyuga clan head. He had the support of the Hyuga. Naruto hugged and thanked Hinata, which caused her to revert back to her shy personality and pass out. Hiashi walked over to Naruto giving him a nod. He took Hinata from Naruto's arms and Shunshined to the Hyuga compound. Once Naruto was at the gate he turned back and gave one last look at Konoha before he would leave. There wasn't anyone at the gate waiting for him due to the fact that he had said goodbye already to anyone that would care about him. Once he was done, Naruto turned and walked out of Konoha and he never looked back. 5 days later. Brood Anbu had been tailing Naruto ever since he had left the village. They had waited until he was far enough from the village before they were going to put their plan into action. That plan being the capture of one Uzumaki Naruto. As of now, the Anbu decided that Naruto was far enough from the village they wouldn't be caught by anyone from it. Shining in front of Naruto, one of the rude Anbu spoke. Uzumaki Naruto, Danzu-sama has decreed that you will join us. We are to now bring you back to the village. Do not try to resist and everything will be much more pleasant. Naruto's eyes widened when he heard them speak. He had heard of Danzu from the old man, Sandaime, and based on what he had heard, Danzu didn't sound like a person Naruto would want to be with. Also when he heard the Anbu say that they were going back to the village his anger rose up a bit. For the past 5 days he had really been able to enjoy himself now that he was away from the village. In fact, now he couldn't even see why he had wanted to protect that place so bad. He was starting to realize that his life really was nothing more than a living hell inside that village, and now these bastards wanted to take him back to that godforsaken place. No fucking way in hell were they gonna do that. As he turned around though he saw that he was now surrounded by the rude Anbu. Cursing under his breath Naruto put his hand together in a familiar seal and called out Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Several clones appeared beside him and Naruto threw several smoke bombs down and enveloped himself and his clones in a smoke screen. Damn, the lead rude Anbu thought as he saw several shadows jump out of the smoke cloud and go in different directions. Split up and find him, use whatever means necessary to bring him down, but don't kill him. Danzu-sama wants him alive. With that the Anbu split up. As Naruto jumped through the treetops as fast as he could he thought to himself, damn it, why can't they just leave me alone? Aren't they satisfied with kicking me out? No, they probably want to mount my head on pike or turn me into some mindless weapon. As if I let that happen. With that thought in mind Naruto began to increase his speed. He almost slipped when he suddenly received information from of his dispersed clones. He saw in its memories how the clone was effortlessly killed by 2 rude Anbu. Oh, shit. Naruto cursed in his mind. He hadn't expected his clones to be defeated that quickly. As he was jumping through the trees he heard a faint whooshing sound that was getting louder very quickly as time went on. Quickly he realized that they were some sort of projectile. He jumped out of the tree he was currently in, just as several poison-laced senbon struck the tree he was in. The rude Anbu suddenly appeared right in the same spot he had been in moments before. They looked around and spotted Naruto hiding in several bushes. He was hiding pretty good and would have gone undetected by the Anbu had they just been using sight alone. Sadly for Naruto, the bright orange abomination of a jumpsuit he was wearing made him stick out like a sore thumb. One of the Anbu sent a mild fireball at Naruto's location. Jumping from his hiding spot now that he had been discovered Naruto cursed his jumpsuit, knowing that it was all the abomination's fault. Honestly, he knew that one day that jumpsuit might very well be the end of him, he just never thought today might be that day. The 2 rude Anbu gave chase as Naruto tried his best to flee. They both began sending various sorts of non-lethal ninjutsu at him in order to render him unconscious. Naruto was able to dodge a good amount of their attacks, but he could only dodge for so long before he would begin to tire. His weariness started to show when the 2 rude Anbu began hitting him with their attacks more often. It was a good thing that Naruto had a high tolerance for pain, as some of the attacks were very painful, non-lethal, but painful. Eventually more Anbu showed up to assist their allies, and it wasn't long before Naruto was running from 6 instead of 2 rude Anbu. The rude Anbu had to give Naruto credit to his large stamina though, as he had been running from them for 2 hours. Sure, he looked exhausted, but still, impressive stamina. As Naruto continued to run from his pursuers his pace began to slow down. The Anbu noticed this and decided to capitalize on it. They knew that there was a cliff up ahead. And they planned to corner him at it. Once they reached the cliff, Naruto backed up as far as he could, while the Anbu blocked off any means of escape save for jumping off the cliff. Naruto couldn't believe this. Here he was trapped like a cornered animal. The Anbu approached warily now, aware that he might unleash the kyuubi's chakra if provoked. As the Anbu neared Naruto backed up until he was at the cliff's edge. Shit, what the hell can I do now? Naruto questioned to himself. He really didn't want to go with the Anbu. Naruto then looked over the cliff's edge, which was really high up, and into the faraway forest below, and thought whether it would be better to jump off or go with the Anbu. Quickly calculating the options in his head, he knew which was the better option. Jumping off the cliff's edge he surprised the Anbu idiots who had honestly thought he would never do that. Eyes widening they tried to stop him only for the effort to be futile. All they could do was watch as the boy Danzu so greatly coveted jumped to his seeming demise. One of the Anbu then asked Suo, "What are we gonna tell Danzu-sama?" The rude Anbu squad leader panicked and said in a worried voice, "We'll look at the bottom to search for his remains. Hopefully the body will be intact enough for Danzu-sama to use. If not, it'll mean all of our heads." The other Anbu grew stiff at that and immediately set out for the bottom of the cliff to search for Naruto's body. Naruto grit his teeth in pain as he tried to get up. He was sure he had a few broken ribs and maybe a broken arm or leg. Blood dripped from numerous wounds all over his body and his lungs seemed to be at their breaking point as it was really hard for him to breathe. Once Naruto was up he tried walking in some random direction, not really knowing where he was going. Pain filled up his entire being as Naruto struggled along. Briefly he wondered why he couldn't feel the kyuubi's chakra healing him at all, before pain once again enveloped all thoughts. Naruto trudged forward slowly, dripping blood as he walked. He noticed this and swore in his mind. Fucking great, now I'm leaving a trail for those dipshit bastards to follow. Naruto knew that there wasn't any point in trying to cover up his tracks. He was just going to have to face them when they came. In the meantime he could still try and find a good place to hide. He continued walking even though he had no idea where he was going, his sense of direction having been completely thrown off by the Anbu's kidnapping attempt. Eventually he was forced to stop walking as the pain in his body had just become too much. He had made it out of the forest and into a clearing before, exhausted to the point of death, Naruto fell face forward onto the ground. He stayed like this for a few minutes as he tried to regain his breath. Naruto then with some effort lifted his head up to see what was ahead of him. He saw that he was facing the very same cliff wall that he had jumped off of. Son of a bitch. Naruto swore in his mind, furious that he had come to a place he had already been, just at a lower height this time. Slowly, against what his body told him, Naruto forced himself to get up. His anger was giving him strength as he moved. That same feeling of power he had had back in the council room bubbled up again as his anger started to grow. Just when he had finally gotten up he heard the sound of people shining behind him. Naruto turned his head around and saw that he had been found again by the rude Anbu. The squad leader then spoke. Uzumaki Naruto, you're proving to be one very annoying person to chase down. I am only going to offer you one more chance to come quietly before we may do something permanent to you. The squad leader said this with contempt in his voice. After all, he could have lost his life if the body had died, and that didn't make him very endeared to Naruto. The other Anbu brought out their own weapons in order to emphasize their leader's threat. Naruto, whose head was bowed down, was steadily getting angrier and angrier with each word that the squad leader said. Naruto began to hear dark whispers in the back of his mind, telling him to give in to his. The squad leader said all of that. Naruto remembered every time that he had ever been mistreated or abused by Konoha. Almost everyone there was guilty of some sort of abuse against Naruto, whether it was physical or emotional. The more he thought about those things, the louder the voices in his head became, was telling Naruto destroy these fools who dared to threaten him. Naruto was starting to agree with the voice and let himself become enveloped in its dark power. But Naruto just stood there making no movement whatsoever. The rude Anbu just assumed that he was giving in. Just as they were about to restrain him, Naruto unleashed an aura of power that none of the Anbu had ever faced before. All of them had participated in the fight against the kyuubi and had felt its horrible aura, yet the aura that this boy was producing was 10 times worse than what the kyuubi produced during its attack on Konoha. The rude Anbu looked on in fear as Naruto slowly raised his head. They were really freaked out when they saw that his eyes had changed from sky blue to a sulfuric yellow. Naruto then raised his hand up and pushed his palm outward, his fingers outstretched. He felt a rush of energy like never before coursing through his entire being. That same energy went out of his palm and towards those fools who had dared to attack him. The Anbu felt a wave of powerful energy slam into them and push them each into a tree. They all screamed in agony as they felt their bodies being melted by the powerful energy. By the time Naruto was done, they were red past splattered all over the trees they were pushed into. The trees themselves looked like they were about to fall over from the power that Naruto had unleashed. Naruto looked down at his hands, wondering where that energy had come from. He could still feel it flowing throughout his body, only now it was more subdued now that his anger had vanished. As he looked at the remains of the Anbu sent to capture him, Naruto strangely felt no remorse at killing them. In fact, he was more interested in how he had killed them. Naruto then heard a large noise behind him. Looking back to see what it was this time, he was surprised to see that a certain part of the cliff wall had sunk into the cliff and then stopped and split into two halves which slid apart to reveal metallic hallways behind them. Naruto then saw a robot, if he was correct, coming out of the hallways and walking towards him. The robot was colored a rusty red and black with eyes that had a red sclera and a blood red iris and pupils. When it reached him, the robot then spoke. "Ah, young master, it is finally good to meet you after waiting for so long." Naruto could only stare in confusion at the robot. Picking up on his confusion, the robot spoke. "Ah, I am sure you would be confused, but do not worry, all will be explained if you would just follow me, young master." With that, the robot turned around and began walking back into the opening in the cliff. Naruto just stared, wide-eyed for a few seconds before making up his mind to follow the robot thing. After all, it wasn't as if he had many other options. Once he was deep enough in the hallway, the door sealed itself back up. Naruto followed the robot deeper into the mysterious complex and hoped that whatever was going on would work out in the end. Several rude Anbu crowded around the remains of their fallen comrades. They didn't show any emotion to the gruesome deaths of their fellow Anbu, well, at least not in front of their leader. Danzu looked around with a grimace. He had expected his Anbu to quickly capture the boy and bring him back to Konoha undetected. Instead, they were all splatters on trees that looked like they were about to fall over. He knew that it was Naruto who had done this. He couldn't sense his chakra at all, or even the kyuubi's chakra, but he could sense something that was similar to the boy. He didn't know what it was, but he was very interested in finding out. He had his Anbu disperse in order to find Naruto, thinking that they would find him. Unfortunately for Danzu, he would never see the boy ever again. Naruto and the robot or droid who had identified itself as HK-51 to Naruto somewhere on their walk stopped in front of a pedestal that had a purple pyramid on it. Naruto then heard a voice coming from the pyramid in front of him. He was unable to make out what it was saying, but he felt a supreme power emanating from the pyramid. Falling into a trance-like state, Naruto began to move forward towards the pyramid. HK-51 merely watched on with interest, wondering if this one would be able to unlock the pyramid's power. Once Naruto was close enough, he grasped a pyramid with his hands and felt a wave of energy go through him. Suddenly an apparition appeared above the pyramid Naruto was holding. Jumping back in surprise, Naruto shouted out, "What the hell are you?" The apparition held its ears in pain and said, "Man, do you have to be so loud? I mean really, was there any need for you to shout, The apparition asked accusingly. HK complained, "Oh, the shout that came out of your mouth nearly destroyed my sound wave processors. Please master, in the future do try to speak a bit quieter, although I do see that becoming a useful weapon of torture in the future. Oh, I can just feel my behavior core lighting up at the prospect of using it on a meatbag." Naruto and the apparition sweat dropped at that, the apparition thinking about how HK always came up with new ways to torture people, while Naruto was just plain freaked out. The apparition's appearance was that of a dark-skinned man who had black hair cut into a buzz cut. His eyes were sulfuric yellow, and his face was that of someone that was in their late 20s. As for the clothing, he was wearing black and red armored robes. All in all, he looked really handsome, but also held an aura of power around himself. The apparition then turned its attention to Naruto and spoke, "Well, young Naruto, it seems like you're the first person to ever unlock this holocron, so you now have the opportunity to learn everything I can teach you, which is a lot. That or you can walk away right now, have your memory wiped, and it'll be like we've never even met." HK decided to give its opinion. "I would advise you take the offer for teaching, young master. After all, it has been so long since I have had a live master, and I would hate to lose one who shows such promise." Naruto then asked HK, "Why do you keep calling me master? I don't see why I would be your master." "That is because, not only were you able to open the hidden entrance with your force powers, but you were able to touch Master Headzuka holocron without being turned into a fried husk. These alone are reasons enough to call you master, but should you decide to take Master Headzuka training, then I will eventually be passed on to you." HK's answer did two things. 1. It satisfied Naruto's curiosity about the who made her thing, and 2. It raised a new question. "Wait, what's the force?" The apparitioner Headzuka, as he had now been identified as, then spoke, "Well, the force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds the galaxy together. That's just a basic description of it though, and you'll more than likely form your own opinion about it if you learn enough. So are you going to accept my training or not?" It didn't take Naruto long to decide, really. After all, it wasn't as if he had anything better he could do. "I accept," was all Naruto said in response. Headzuka gained a smirk on his face and said, "Excellent, now Naruto, let the training begin." Naruto had heard the slip up and wondered just what he had gotten himself into. Headzuka's maniacal laughter surprisingly didn't soothe his fears. 3 years have passed since Naruto met Headzuka and began his training. In this short period of time, Naruto mastered everything Headzuka had to teach him and then some. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Naruto being able to spam shadow clones by the millions. In total, Naruto received 300 years' worth of training with the help of clones. The first 100 years with clones of Naruto's training was consisted of lightsaber training, lessons on commanding a starship, tactics training, manipulation training, droid construction, starfighter piloting lessons, strength endurance training, chakra control, and Kekkei Genkai training. The second 200 years with clones was focused on refining Naruto's lightsaber style, which was a combination of Danmachi, forms 2 Jerkai, and Trispsist. The third 300 years with clones was basically lessons on how to wage war, how to run an empire, refining his force powers, charisma, Sith runes, Sith alchemy, Sith magic, weapon construction, history, manipulation on massive scales, and navigation. Holocron room. "Ooh, for the last time Naruto, I don't have anything else to teach you, your clone made sure of that. You've learned everything from me, Darth Revan Coder Dark Side Ending, Darth Vitiate, Darth Nihilus, and Mark Aragno." Headzuka groaned before answering Naruto for what had to be the third time this week. Naruto had grown from the Kill Me orange jumpsuit wearing midget he was 3 years ago, now he stood at 6'4". His body lost what little baby fat he had in his ninja days was replaced with the muscles of an athlete. The Kill Me orange jumpsuit was burned with force lighting, then replaced with a heavily repaired and upgraded helmet of Revan and armor that was similar to the armor of the Neo Crusaders. The armor was 80% Beskar and 15% Kurtosis, making the armor damn near indestructible, not to mention that it can short out a lightsaber, making them useless. Naruto's eyes changed from blue to the sulfuric yellow common to most Sith Lord. Naruto's face lost the baby fat it held 3 years earlier. He could now be confused with his father. Yes, he knows who his father is. Kyuubi told him after his fall to the dark side. If he were to walk into Konoha, the civilians would cheer for the Fourth's return. After hearing that he learned everything his masters had to teach him, a smirk spread across his face. Finally, I can leave this hellhole of a planet and erase the GT from the galaxy, Naruto thought. Masters, if what you say is true, then I want my title as Dark Lord of the Sith and my Darth name, Naruto stated commanded. The all-dead Sith Lords began commutating via telepathic link. 10 minutes passed before they finally broke the link and turned back to Naruto, and Revan began speaking. Kneel before use, apprentice, Revan commanded. Naruto kneeled in front of the pedestal that held the Sith holocrons, losing the playfulness he usually displayed. From this day forth you shall be called Darth. Nesti means hatred in Sith, Dark Lord of the Sith. Now rise, Lord Nesti, and claim your gifts from the Sith Lords of old. Revan said with pride for his student. As Naruto stood up, a necklace with red crystal, a black lightsaber crystal with a red center, materialized in his hand. That necklace will allow you to communicate and summon us from anywhere in the galaxy, and don't lose it, as it's the only one you'll get. That lightsaber crystal is tuned to your force presence, so only you can use it. Also, it will amplify your dark side powers, Sasuke explained. Naruto unclipped his lightsaber and began taking it apart and plucked the synthetic crystal from the primary crystal mount and put the new crystal in. After reassembling the lightsaber, Naruto pressed the activation button and a red blade with a black outline shot to life. After a few test swings, Naruto deactivated the blade and turned back to the spirits. Thank you, masters, Naruto said, while bowing to the old Sith Lord. 12 hours later. Once Naruto was done thanking his masters, he sealed the holocrons in the storage seal on his neck and went to his quarters to pack his belongings. Naruto then walked out of his quarters. He walked down the hall and stopped in front of a door that was painted red with "Keep Out" written in black letters. Hearing loud snoring on the other end, Naruto gained a mischievous look. At this point, I know you're all wondering why the hell is Naruto not acting like a Sith Lord. Well, here's the thing, Naruto won't be Sith-like all the time when he's in the company of family or trusted comrades. That spelled trouble for the person on the other end of the door. Naruto used the force to silently open the sliding door and tiptoed over to the side of the large bed in the center of the room. The sole occupant of the bed was an armor-clad 17-year-old girl with a pinkish-red shade of hair, snoring loudly in a soon-to-be short-lived sleep. Mischievous look still on his face, Naruto began going through hand seals for a small water jutsu. Halfway through his hand seals, an armored foot kicked Naruto in his crotch. The results were instantiates. Naruto stopped, dropped and rolled in pain while screaming in a high-pitched voice. A sense of imminent oblivion rolled over Naruto as he slowly looked behind him, revealing a girl that was slightly shorter than him by an inch or two. Said girl's hair was split into 9 tails. The first tail was spiked on one side, that were waving through the air, with the Shinigami hovering behind her. At the sight of the Shinigami, Naruto hopped up from the ground and jumped onto the bed, waking an occupant who was yelling profanity at the one who woke her up. Naruto-kun, were you about to prank Tayuya? The sickly sweet voice of the girl asked. Naruto's mind raced to find a lie that she would believe before he decided on what to tell her. No, I was here to tell you too that I've been given the title Dark Lord of the Sith and that we'll be leaving the planet for a few months, Naruto said in a meek voice with sweat dripping down his face. Naruto closed his eyes and waited for death to come. So, this is how it ends. I've only been a Dark Lord for 12 hours, and this is how my story ends, Naruto thought with regret. The death blow never came. Instead, Naruto felt himself being pulled into a tight hug by his would-be executor, cutting off his airways. Karen can't breathe, Naruto wheezed out, turning purple due to lack of oxygen. The now named Karen blushed in embarrassment at the fact that she nearly killed her cousin in her short bout of happiness. Heiau stared at the two dumbasses he called cousins with a sweat drop. He calls himself a Sith Lord, yet he let Karen sneak up and attack him, then he cowers in fear like a beep and tricks Karen back to her normal super happy mask. Revan was right, the Force did have a fucked up sense of humor. I'm related to two all-powerful dumbasses, the galaxy is fucking doomed. Tayuya thought while smashing her head against the wall behind her bed. Naruto looked at Tayuya, reading her mind and hearing the dumbest comment. He did the logical thing to do and flipped her off before gaining, all jokes aside, pack your shit and meet me in the hangar in 3 hours, or I'll find you and kill you. Cyber cookie to whoever knows what movie that line came from. Force lighting to whoever gets it wrong. Now hurry up and pack, Naruto threatened the two girls with lighting dancing around his fingers. With that said, Naruto left out of the room and began making his way to the hangar to prep the ship and make sure it wouldn't stall mid-hyperspace and send him into the Mawagain. 3 hours later. 3 hours went by fast for Naruto, since he didn't want to come out of hyperspace in a system that was full of black holes. Statement. The two female masters have arrived. Master HK-47 Naruto has HK-47 and HK-51, informed Naruto. Naruto looked up from his position under the hyperdrive. Good, is HK-51 on board as well? Statement. Yes, the inferior model is in the cargo hold. Wiping the hyperdrive coolant off the jumpsuit he put on so he wouldn't dirty his armor while repairing the hyperdrive, Naruto stood up and cracked his neck. Help Taiyuya and Karen settle in while I prep the Fury for takeoff. Naruto commanded before walking off to the B pit to prep for takeoff. 10 minutes of ship prep later. After prepping the ship and running another systems check to make sure everything is in order and not going to explode, Naruto opened the hangar doors, wincing at the rusty gears, grinding together. Mental note, have HK-51 oil the gears, Naruto thought. Once the hangar doors were opened, Naruto eased the Fury out of the hangar. He closed the hangar doors and floored the engines and shot through the air, breaking the atmosphere in just a few minutes. Once the ship was out of the planet's gravity field, Naruto input coordinates to the Lihan System, the star to be precise, and entered hyperspace. The stars became streaks of light outside the Fury's viewpoint. Naruto unstrapped himself from the pilot seat and commanded HK-51, who just walked in, to take over and inform he when they drop out of hyperspace. Naruto then walks to his meditation chambers. While passing by the engine room he pokes his head in and death glares at the hyperdrive before continues on. Once within the solitude of his meditation chamber, Naruto sits crosslegged, I don't know the name of the position, on the cold steel floor and began to use the necklace given to him by his former masters. Naruto call on the spirit of Revan, who appears in his fear-inducing glory. Master, we've left the planet and entered hyperspace using the coordinates you gave me. But are you sure the Star Forge is still usable? You did say it went into hibernation after your disappearance. Naruto asked his former master. Yes, I'm sure it's still usable. The Star Forge, like all Rakuten technology, uses a self-repairing system that's fueled by the Lihan system star, so it's still there unless the star has died. The deceased Dark Lord explained. Also, Master, I've sensed an anomaly in the force coming from the Maw cluster, and this voice is whispering in the very back of my mind, telling me that Mother is calling her children home. This isn't the part that disturbs me, though. The last time I was in the Maw, the voice was guiding me to two black holes that were right next to each other. The black holes themselves felt like they were made by the dark side. This is a most disturbing development. Although some of my Dark GD went missing while I was still alive, the transponders of their ships were tracked to the Maw, but I never sent anyone to investigate as I was betrayed by Malak before I could. For now, stay away from the Maw until I've investigated this. Yes, Master. The two Dark Lords continued taking for most of the trip through hyperspace, which was mostly Revan telling Naruto about his many adventures in the unknown region, tactics he used against the Republic, and the many battles he had when he still walked among the living. 21 hours later. The 21-hour hyperspace trip to the Star Forge went by fast for the Dark Lord and his companions, since Naruto was inside the meditation chamber with Revan. Taiyuya and Karen were either sleeping or eating. Naruto nor Revan didn't even notice the time fly by. They would have kept on talking if Naruto's comlink hadn't started beeping, which Naruto turned around answered. HK-51's holographic body appeared informing Naruto that they were 10 minutes from dropping out of hyperspace. After Naruto shut off the comlink, he turned around and saw that Revan disappeared. Shaking his head, Naruto walked out of his chamber and walked to the beep pit. Walking through the door to the beep pit, Naruto sat in the pilot seat and dropped the ship out of hyperspace. The jerked as it entered normal space. Naruto tuned the Fury to Lihan's energy field so the ship wouldn't crash on the planet. Looking out the beep pit's viewport, Naruto's eye enlarged to the size of dinner plates. Revan said the Star Forge was huge, but not this huge. This thing had to be at least 40 times the size of Konoha, and then some. Naruto thought in wonder. Naruto uses the Force to find one of Deck 1's many hangars and maneuvers the Fury to Deck 1 and sat the ship down in the large hangar. Getting out of the pilot seat, Naruto heads to the cargo bay and exits the ship, foregoing waking Taiyuya and Karen. Now standing in the hangar, Naruto removed his helmet to breathe the air of the Star Forge and was slapped by the smell of death and decay. Naruto fell to his knees, throwing up his lunch, then putting his helmet back on, enjoying the filtered air. Looking around, Naruto just now noticing the dead bodies scattered around the hangar, some littered with holes, some missing body parts, and some wearing Republic or Sith uniforms. Naruto also noticed that the hangar was full of Sith fighters and bombers. The armor-clad Dark Lord came to the conclusion that he was the first person to set foot on the Star Forge since Revan's disappearance, and that without a master to feed of it, turned to every living thing on the station as a food source, which would explain the corpses and the smell. Question. Master, do you require directions to the brain of the Star Forge? HK-47 asked, just now exiting the ship. Naruto, hearing HK's question, was broken out of his thoughts. Lead the way, Naruto answered before following HK to the turbolift that would take them to the brain of the Star Forge. Deck-110. Once Naruto and HK were inside, the turbolift began its descent to the bowels of the Star Forge. After a 12-minute turbolift ride, the turbolift stopped deck -110. Naruto and HK stepped out of the turbolift and looked around. The corridor that they were in was narrow, pipes and tubes covered the ceiling. At the very end of the corridor was a large automated door. Naruto and HK walked single file since the corridor was too small to walk side by side. Once they reached the door, it slid open, revealing a dark room. HK used the flashlight on his droid assassin's rifle to shine light into the room, while Naruto used the night vision sight on his helmet. Naruto and HK walk into the room, then without warning the door slammed shut and the lights turned on. The room was painted pitch black, and in the center of the room was a larger projection of a Rakuten male that seemed to be in hibernation, coming from a command console directly in front of him. Naruto and HK approached the console. The projection's eyes snapped open and looked at Naruto and his homicidal droid before speaking. "Yes, you are the one the elders prophesied that will lead the Rakata back to our former glory." The air of playfulness that Naruto usually showed was replaced with a cold-hearted killer. Darth Nesti, the Dark Lord of the Sith. "The Rakata went extinct during the time of Revan's empire," said Nesti. "From this point on Naruto will be called Nesti." The Rakata on the homeworld died out, but a large group left the planet during the time of the fall of the Infinite Empire to a nearby star system with all of the technology the Infinite Empire created before the fall, explained the Starforge. "How do you know all of this if they left the system?" asked Nesti. "When I was created, I was connected to all Rakuten technology to allow me to collect data on the worlds the Infinite Empire enslaved and produce better weapons," answered the Starforge. "If what you say is true, then you can tell how many Rakata are left, right? Also, I want to know how strong their connection to the dark side is," Nesti said, thinking of a way to get the Rakata to follow him. "The Rakata are tribal and are led by a chief or elders depending on the tribes. I could kill the leaders in combat and take over the tribes one by one," Nesti thought. The Starforge went silent for a few seconds before he answered. "There are 10.9 billion Rakata left. Most of them are. As for their connection to the dark side, it's almost as strong as the Rakata from before the fall," said the Starforge before pausing. "There are also 1.4 billion other species, possibly slaves or servants," the Starforge continued. "On to more pressing matters. What is your production output rates? Do you have an archive, and where are your training rooms? Also, where do I input the schematics?" asked Nesti, mentally filing the information away for later. "I can produce 3-star dreadnoughts, 400 super dreadnoughts, 800 dreadnoughts, 6,000 gunships, and near endless amount of troop transports, weapons, droids, starfighters, bombers, armor, and spy probes in 1 month. The archive is on deck 20, the training rooms are also on deck 20, and you can upload the schematics here on the console, and I will begin production once they're uploaded," the Starforge answered. The Fury. Nesti just finished uploading the schematics. Him and HK-47 were returning to the ship. As they were walking up the boarding ramp, the Force told Nesti to duck. As soon as he did, HK-51 flew over his head and collided with HK-47, sending them stumbling back down the boarding ramp, landing in a heap. Nesti back flipped out of the way of a red-haired missile who also landed in a heap on top of the two HKs. "The fuck was that?" thought Nesti. Naruto looked around to see where the red missile came from. His Force awareness lit up, tell him to block. Nesti's lightsaber ignited in a fraction of a second, blocking a strike that would have decapitated him, and retaliated by sending black force lighting through the blade of his lightsaber before electrocuting his attacker, shutting down their motor functions. "Nice try, Kyuubi," Nesti said, sarcasm dripping off his voice like slime off a hut. "How did you know it was me?" Kyuubi asked from her position on the ground. "You used Karen and HK-51 as projectiles and were on a space station that nobody has set foot on in almost 1,000 years," Nesti replied with a deadpan. Nesti started walking off before he turned back around and said, "The archives and training rooms are on deck 20. If you need me, I'll be in the command center above deck 2 making new schematics and consulting the spirits of the Dark Lords for the location of Sith tribes and credit stashes if you need me." He then walked out of the Fury, stepping over the HKs and Karen and stepping back into the turbolift and heading to deck 2, then to the command center. 20 hours later. Nesti's eyes snapped open as he felt the Starforge appear in the command center. "Master, my sensors indicate that a large ship has dropped of hyperspace. When I scanned the ship for life forms, the scans came up negative. There are no living life forms on board, but the ship looks like a larger design of the HAREM class dreadnought, as you called it," the Starforge informed its master. Hearing this, Nesti's mind went into overdrive, going through every piece of information Vitiate told him about prototype ships going missing, before his mind reached the conclusion that the ship was the Void Star, a prototype battleship that went missing during the Great Galactic War but was rediscovered during the Cold War. Then both sides fought over the ship, then the ship disappeared in a flash of light and everybody on board was never heard from again. "Stir. Master," the Starforge's voice snapped Nesti out of his thoughts. "Yes, you were saying something?" Nesti asked looking at the Starforge's hologram, the mind not the large hologram. Do you want me to send a regiment of HK droids to investigate the ship? The Starforge repeated looking at the blonde Dark Lord. Send the regiment, I'll lead them myself, Nesti said getting up from his position of the floor, stretching to get the kinks out of his joints. Nesti walked to the turbolift and stepped in heading to deck 67 to inspect the HK droids before they head out to the. Nesti noticed that the turbolift ride went by quicker than normal, but he added it up to anticipation. When he stepped out of the turbolift his eyes bugged out, the deck could easily the biggest one out of all the ones he's seen so far. The deck was built like a warehouse, except all the containers were replaced with row upon of droids, some holding proton torpedo launchers, some holding a variety of snipers, some with disruptor weapons, most holding standard blaster rifles, and a small few that were the Black Op units. His eyes landed on his crown achievement, the technological beepizer and memorizer droid, aka Tech. Tech is one of the Ox sent in by Sage of Fanfiction, for short. The left half of Tech's plating, droid medium plating type 1, was dark red, while the right was painted light red, think Two-Face's suit from Batman. To the unsuspecting eye Tech is simply an oddly architect droid, but really he's an advanced spy droid that's equipped with a scomp link, an advanced droid interface, and droid machine interface, and dual-link beepizer circuit, a specialized technological scanner and recorder sensor scope, and an advanced repair kit. Weapon-wise he is packing a shield disruptor in left arm and an arm-mounted and concealable ion stunner pistol in the right arm. Tech is able to completely scan and understand most tech, which he can then duplicate if given the right tools and resources such as a factory which he knows how to operate it, and he is even capable of improving tech to a limited degree by cross-referencing with other bits of tech, although some tech takes longer to properly scan and beepize, such as the Infinite Empire technology, but it is still possible. Any and all tech is sent to the Starforge then to Nesti's and or whoever he appoints head of R&D for approval to build. When Nesti walked in front of Tech his blue sensors lit up. Yes my lord, what is thy bidding? Would you perhaps like me to infiltrate some meatbags corporations then take over said corporations? Tech asked, his voice going from respectful to power hungry. Nesti ignored that. Well I think the HK and spy personalities must have mixed in during his creation, or worst case scenario, HK-47 tampered with Tech's programming, making him almost like HK-47 just spy based. Nesti almost shivered at the thought of having another HK-47 running around. One is bad enough. Tech, you are to infiltrate the GD temple on Coruscant. You are to steal all data from their archives and data on the GD. Then you are to plant bugs in their system to spy, collect any new data, virus to wipe the archives and bombs in the lower levels where there are little to no guards. After that task has been completed report back here for further assignments. You already know which ship is yours so you can leave at any time. Nesti commanded. Yes my lord, I will complete this assignment with haste. Tech said before heading to his ship which was somewhere in the far back of the deck. But that out of the way Nesti focused on the task at hand, picking out the legions he wanted to be his to command directly. He walked past many legions of droids before the two largest legion he's seen so far caught his eye. They were the 99th HK Black Ops Legion, having numbers of 45,000. This legion is almost 5 times larger than the 501st Clone Legion and the 1st Legion HK Stealth Legion, which was also 45,000 strong. These models were taller than the generic HK droid standing at 6. Both were painted black with red sensors with either a disruptor rifle or disruptor sniper in their hands. As the month on the Starforge went on, a lot of things happened. Nesti led the HKs and took control of the Void Star. Nesti's Star Dreadnought, which he named the Pride of the Sith, along with the other ships were completed. Yuya and Karen chose the legions they wanted to command, and Yuya choosing the 121st Assault Legion and the 2nd Black Ops Legions, while Karen chose the 100th Torture and Interrogation Legion and the 3rd Black Ops Legion, and Tech successfully infiltrated the GD Temple and was sending the data from the archive weekly. Viewing platform. We find Nesti standing in the viewing platform looking at his flagship, the Pride of the Sith, a Eradicator class Harrower Star Dreadnought, a Harrower that's not split down the middle, which was 23,000 meters in length, making it the largest ship to ever be produced as far as Nesti know. The ship was propelled by 12 Harrower 50 X engines positioned in the rear of the ship, enabling the starship to move at 50 mglt, megalight per hour. The starship was armed with 15,000 heavy turbolaser cannons, fire-linked in groups of 5, 2,500 assault concussion missile tubes with 30 missiles each, 1,000 heavy ion cannons, 2,000 anti-starfighter cannons, 40 Phylon transport Q7 tractor beam projectors, 3,000 point defense laser cannons. 7 null cannons, and retractable ion pulse cannon on the front on the ship, 2 gravity well projectors, and over 100 stygium crystal cloaking devices combined into one clocking device. Overall, this ship was a fleet killer just by itself, with it being able to sneak behind enemy lines and disable their ships with the ion pulse cannon. Also, the Pride of the Sith has a large complement currently filled with 2000 modified Mk. Vi Supremacy class starfighters, 2000 FT-3C Imperiums, 2500 GSS-5C Dustmakers, 2500 Imperial Shuttles, 2000 B-28 Extinction class, 2000 D-5 Decimus, 100 Y-85 Titan dropships, 100 Rakuten Annihilators, 200 Rakuten Walkers, enough food and water to last 2 years, and 3 prefabricated garrison bases. The flagship of Nesti was escorted by 200 Harrower-class dreadnoughts and 100 BSX-5 dreadnoughts, both carrying standard Mk. Vi Supremacy-class starfighters and stygium crystal cloaking devices. Nesti let out a yawn as his eyelids grew heavy before he fell asleep standing. But his rest was short-lived as his helmet impacted the floor, waking up the Sith Lord. Shaking his head, Nesti picked himself up off the floor and walked over to the bed. He had HK-51 Dragon last week. Laying his head down on the pillow, Nesti drifted to sleep but was brought into a force vision. Nesti appeared in what looked to be a Mandalorian camp, but he couldn't tell which clan it belonged to. Looking around, Nesti spotted a banner with a picture of the Starforge printed on it in red. Nesti still couldn't figure out which clan it was for the life of him, but he felt like it was right in front of him. It's Clan Ordo, the clan that my old friend Canderous Ordo started after the GD Civil War. The voice of Revan said as his body phased into existence next to Nesti. Master, did you bring me here, wherever here is? Asked Nesti, his former master. No, I was dragged into this vision with you, and we appear to be on Duxn. Answered Revan. I believe the Force is telling you that now would be a good time to recruit some of the Mandalorian clans into your soon-to-be empire. Revan continued. Seeing that the young Dark Lord was thinking of ways to get the Mando clans into his soon-to-be empire, Revan decided to tell Nesti the best way to get the Mandalorians under his banner. The quickest way to get the Mandalorians under your banner would be to challenge the Mandalore to a death battle for the title of Mandalore. Also, get new armor so that you don't lose the respect of the clans. Revan explained to the blonde Sith Lord before removing himself from the vision. Nesti, following his master's example, he removed himself from the vision, completely disregarding the possibility that there could have been another reason that he was there. Viewing platform. Nesti shot up out of his bed and got off of the bed. He began to take off the armor he wore for the past 3 years and sealed it into a storage seal on his chest. He then unsealed his own version of the armor of Darth Marr. The armor's hard to describe, but I'm going to do my best to describe it, but I'll put a link on my profile. The helmet was black and red with a V-shaped visor and covered by a red hood that was built into the chest piece. The chest piece was the same as the original, but the life support pack on the front and back was replaced with the insignia of Nesti's Sith Empire, which was the Starforge surrounded by a pentagon with arrows shooting out of the Starforge. Think the insignia of the Sith Empire. But the dot is replaced with the Starforge. The spikes sticking out the back out of the chest piece were replaced with a black cape with his insignia. The leg greaves were mostly covered by the reddish-black knee-high boots were black, and the gauntlets were crimson red with a built-in flamethrower on the left arm and a poison dart shooter on the right. After Nesti finished strapping on the last piece, he put on his cape to complete the look of the true Dark Lord of the Sith. Beep. Beep. Nesti's comlink beeped, alerting him that someone was calling him. Answering the comlink, Taiyuya holographic form appears. What is it? When are we going to see some action? We've been cooped up on this space station for a fucking month, and it's starting to get to Karen. Shess been talking to a wall for the past hour, and it's starting to creep me the fuck out. Nesti pretended he didn't hear the part about Karen talking to a wall. We're going to be heading out to Mandalore so that I can become the new Mandalore. Will there be any killing involved? After I become the Mandalore, you can kill a few of the peace-loving Mandalorians to get the attention of the Republic. Then we're heading to Naboo to meet with this fake Dark Lord of the Sith. After that we'll go to Duxn, and finally we'll look for planets to conquer that were in Revan's empire here in the unknown regions. Alright, Imin. You thought you had a choice in the matter. Shithead. Tomato. Meet me on the bridge of the Pride of the Sith and bring Karen with you. After Nesti cut the transmission, he walked out of the viewing platform and headed to the hangar. Pride of the Sith bridge corridor. Nesti beat Taiyuya and Karen to the bridge by almost 30 minutes. The two redheads walked down the corridor that leads to the bridge, which was the same as the bridge of a regular Harrower, but a lot more space and filled with droids. Karen was hugging a piece of metal, whispering to it, while Taiyuya was trying to ignore her. But she was making it hard since she started kissing the slab of metal. Honestly, it was funny at first, but now it's getting really creepy. The two redheads walk through the blast door that leads to the bridge, which opens up to reveal a busy bridge with pilot model HK droids in the trenches, calibrating the safest hyperspace route out of the unknown regions, then to Mandalore. In the middle of all this, Nesti was standing in front of the viewport, looking at the gas giant of the Lihan system. He didn't notice Taiyuya and Karen walk up behind him until Karen began to hug the slab of metal, which started to creak and groan in protest. When Nesti heard the groaning of the metal, he turns around to the side of Karen hugging said metal and Taiyuya inching away from Karen. Nesti raised an eyebrow and called over a droid to take the metal from Karen, then take her to the medbay to get her head scanned and fixed by the med droid. After the droid managed to pry the slab from the possibly insane redhead, losing an arm in the process, it dragged her out of the bridge. Nesti and Taiyuya looked at each other, then the severed robot arm that was clawing at the blast door, then back to each other, then back to the arm. Taiyuya was the first one to speak. "What the fuck," the vulgar redhead said, taking the words out of Nesti's mouth. Before Nesti could speak, one of the pilot droids informed him that the fleet was ready to jump to hyperspace and that they needed his approval to make the jump. Nesti gave the good to go on the jump to hyperspace. Nesti and Taiyuya watched as they entered the blue hyperspace tunnel, and the stars became streaks of light as the pride of the Sith started to move it faster than light travel. 12 hours later. 12 hours had passed, and they were only a third of the way to their destination. After the first hour of the trip, Naruto and Taiyuya got bored of watching the hyperspace tunnel, so they began meditating to pass the time. To someone who's never seen a Force user meditate, it would look like the two were asleep, but they weren't even close to sleep. They have been communicating through the Force bond they share and watching the hyperspace route for any dangers to his fleet, such as black holes, pirates, asteroids, and things of that such. Hyperspace 20 minutes out from Mandalore. Nesti, Taiyuya, Karen, who had returned from the medbay halfway through the trip completely normal, were interrupted from their meditation when a HK droid informed them that they were 20 minutes out from Mandalore. Nodding his head, Nesti told the droid to have ever ship but his drop out of hyperspace when they were 5 minutes out from, sat back down and resumed meditating. Mandalore. The pride of the Sith dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Mandalorian sensors. Why, you may ask? Well, that answer is very simple. Nesti wanted the Jedi that were stationed in the capital city to come and investigate when the new Mandalorians try to contact them, and Nesti politely tells them to fuck off and bomb a city or two to get the attention of the Jedi Order, who would send a Jedi to investigate the destroyed cities. The leader of the new Mandalorians, Duchess Satine Kryze, would surely tell them that a massive ship opened fire on two of their cities, like the loyal peace-loving Republic lapdog she was. Then the Jedi would send Jedi to search for the unknown ship, which they would find and die before they could even inform the Jedi that the Sith were back. Nesti almost laughed at how predictable the Jedi and their lapdogs were. That's always been one of the two major reasons the Sith always nearly destroy the Jedi and the Republic. The other reason was the Jedi's inability to update their code. Well, the Sith code was always changing with every new Force-chosen Dark Lord of the Sith. The only reason the Sith always lost in the end was because of the infighting of the Sith. A prime example would be Revan. The Republic would have been destroyed within a year's time if Malak hadn't betrayed Revan. Nesti was so caught up in his thoughts he almost didn't notice the HK droid tell him that they were being hailed by the new Mandalorian's capital city Sundari. Putting his thoughts of the flaws of the Jedi and Sith away for later, he told the droid to patch the call through to the ship's comm unit. The holographic form of a comm officer appeared on the comm unit. "Please power down your ship and await an inspection team to inspect your ship for any illegal contraband. You have no need to inspect my ship, and you will put your leader on the comm. I have been set by the Republic on orders of the utmost importance." Nesti said, a mind trick on the soon-to-be-dead comm officer. "I have no need to inspect your ship, and I will put my leader on the comm. Please wait a moment," the officer said with his face blank and voice void of any emotions, making him sound like a drone, signifying that the mink trick was a success. The comm unit went blank for a few moments before the form of the Duchess appeared. "You claim that the Republic has sent you, but I was not informed of this. I'm sorry if I find your claim hard to believe," the Duchess asked, already suspecting that something wasn't right. "I wish to speak to the current Mandalore." "You will not find that savage barbarian on Mandalore. If you were sent by the Republic, then you would have known that, plus your ship's transponder doesn't match any known Republic ship. Who really sent you? Your armor does not resemble that of the Death Watch," the Duchess said with a sour look and venom when Nesti said Mandalore. Nesti's eyes narrowed. So this was the peace-loving group of Mandalorians. "I'll make sure she dies painfully strapped to Karen's experimentation table." Nesti thought as the tone that she was talking to with reminded him of the civilian council. It pissed him off, and beings that pissed Nesti weren't among the living for much longer. "I would advise that you watch who you're talking to with that tone. It could piss off someone that has a ship with enough firepower to turn your little cities into smoldering piles of scrap," Nesti said with lighting sparking between his fingers. "Are you threatening me, boy? Do you know who I am?" The Duchess said, gaining a sneer from the Dark Lord. "No, I'm not threatening you, just stating a fact, and names and titles mean nothing to me. Action speaks louder than words." Yuya and Karen had to step back to avoid getting electrocuted by the torrents of lighting that were shooting from the fingertips of the Sith Lord. "I will allow you 2 hours time to vacate the system before I have the planetary defenses open fire on your ship," the Duchess said, moving to end the transmission. As soon as the words left her mouth, all hell broke loose. GD Temple. The GD Council were meditating in the council's chamber when they felt millions of lives scream in terror before their screams were extinguished by a large blast of the dark side. All of the council and the inhabitants of the GD Temple, with the exception of Yoda, who was around during the time before Darth Bane, boosting Yoda's age by 500 years, making him around 1475, fell to their knees drenched in sweat. A small few, 200 to be exact, died from their hearts and their brains exploding, instantly killing them. The screams of terror lasted for only an hour, but to the GD it felt an eternity. Then there was silence in the Force, as if what just occurred never happened. Naboo Palpatine's office. Palpatine was in his office in the capital city tree doing holowork, Star Wars version of paperwork, since flimsies, paper, haven't been used since before the time of the Republic, when he felt a large blast of the dark side that easily dwarfed both his and his former master's combined powers. Palpatine was livid and fearful at the same time. On one hand, he knew that the dark side had selected the next Dark Lord of the Sith, and it wasn't him. On the other, he was fearful. It was a well-known fact to most Sith Lords that Palpatine was the self-proclaimed Dark Lord of the Sith, which meant that the true Dark Lord would come for his head, and Palpatine knew that he would not live if he fought said Dark Lord. Sith clans and tribes all over the galaxy. The followers of the rule of one and felt the large blast of dark side energies and swarmed to their starfighters, then to the location the energies originated from. Law Cluster. An entity of the dark side let an evil smile that showed rows of sharp teeth, knowing that a release was going to happen sooner than expected. Mandalore 1 hour prior. "I will allow you 2 hours time to vacate the system before I have the planetary defenses open fire on your ship," the Duchess said, moving to end the transmission. As soon as the words left her mouth, all hell broke loose. "Target every bio-cube except the one that this signal is coming from. Wipe the peace-loving scum off the face of the galaxy. Base Delta 0 clearance code BDZ000956436456. Nesti commanded. Clearance code accepted. All weapons fire with extreme prejudice. All bomber craft are cleared to launch," the Admiral droid ordered. Nesti turned back to the comm unit, enjoying the horrified expression on the Duchess's face. "All of this could have been avoided if held your tongue, but don't worry, you won't die here. I'll allow you to live just to watch you suffer as the guilt of knowing that you're the main reason that the people that looked up to you as their leader are now atoms. I wouldn't advise suicide, as I can just bring you back to life. Say your goodbyes to your loved ones, because in the next few minutes they'll be vaporized," Nesti said to the Duchesses, who had begun to cry and beg him to stop the attack. Her response was Nesti's bone-chilling laughter that echoed around the bridge. Yuya and Karen, up until the point where their cousin and master begun to laugh, were looking out the viewport that was facing the planet. Yuya was recording the desert turning into glass, and Karen was taking notes with a datapad that she always carried. The vibrations of the orbital bombardment could be felt from the other side of the planet, which piqued the interest of the Mandalorian clans that hid during the exile of the Mandalorians. The blonde Sith Lord walked back to the comm unit and called the Duchess just to see her suffering. When the holographic image of the Duchess appeared, and she looked like she had been to hell and back. Her eyes were red and puffy, showing that she had been crying. Her makeup was running, and she was trying to cut her neck with a vibro knife, but before she could slit her throat, a blaster went off, and the Duchess fell to the ground out cold. "I did warn her not to attempt suicide. Good work, HK-47. Bring her back to Karen's experimentation lab on the Pride and make sure she doesn't wake up anytime soon," Nesti commanded while shaking his head. Hopeful statement. "Can I kill any meatbags that get in my way, Master?" HK asked. Nesti gained a thoughtful expression. "As long as you have her in the lab in the next 30 minutes, I don't care what you do," answered before cutting the transmission. "Master, a small ship is hailing us. It bears the mark of the Neo-Crusaders," a random HK droid said. "Patch the transmission to the comm unit in my chambers," Nesti said, walking out of the bridge with Yuya and Karen following behind him. Nesti's chamber. The automated door that led into the living quarters opened, allowing the 3 Sith Lords to step into the large chamber. The chamber was, for a lack of better words, huge, at least 4 times the size of his old apartment. The chamber was painted black with a king-sized bed on the far back wall, with a nightstand to the left of it and a lightsaber and armor rack on the right. In the center of the room was a throne, workbench, and a comm unit that was beeping. Nesti sat in the throne with Yuya and Karen standing on either side of him and answered the comm unit. The holographic form of a large man that was standing at 6'4", built like a brick house and wearing a red and black colored Neo-Crusader armor with a model MSD-32 disruptor pistol holstered on his hip and a DXR-6 disruptor rifle on his back, appeared when Nesti turned on the comm unit. "I am Javan Ardo, current leader of the Neo-Crusaders." The now named Javan introduced himself. "I am Darth Nesti, Dark Lord of the Sith and former apprentice of Darth Revan, and 3 other former Dark Lords of the Sith, 2 of which were emperors. The 2 beside me are Taiyuya and Karen, my second and third in command of my soon-to-be established empire," Nesti said. When Nesti said that he was the apprentice of Darth Revan, Javan began to kneel, getting a raised eyebrow from Nesti, Taiyuya, and Karen. "May I ask why you are kneeling, Javan?" Nesti asked, although he suspected this had something to do with Revan's habit of foreplanning. During the reign of Mandalore the Preserver, he left orders for the Neo-Crusaders to name the apprentice of Revan the new Mandalore. Javan explained. "I assume there's going to be some kind of combat test to see if I am worthy of the mantle of Mandalore," Nesti asked, getting a smile from Javan although he couldn't see it. "Yes, normally yes, Mandalorian tradition states that you would have to face the current Mandalore, but how would you achieve that if there hasn't been a true Mandalore since the death of Mandalore the Preserver? But if you insist on proving your worth in combat, I'm sure someone on Duxon will challenge you for your mantle once you're publicly named Mandalore," Javan said with a smirk. "No, I guess I can't fight someone that's already dead now, can I?" Nesti said with a matching smirk. Beep. 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 Nesti's comlink started beeping, taking it off of his belt, he patched the call into the comm unit. The Admiral droid holographic form appeared next to Javan. "Master, the sensors are picking up a large fleet of ships varying from corvettes to warships approaching the system," the droid reported, making Nesti's eyes to narrow. "The Republic shouldn't have been able to send a fleet this fast, and the closest Sith are still a few days away," Nesti thought. "You don't have to worry about those ships, they're under my command. We were en route to the Mandalore to reclaim her in the name of the Neo-Crusaders, but our spy on the planet informed me that someone did our job for us," Javan said, interrupting Nesti's train of thought. "Have the rest of the fleet jump in, Javan, inform your forces that I'm the new Mandalore, and if anybody that is against it, they can fight me for my title," Nesti said, giving his first command as the Mandalore. "Yes, Master Mandalore." With that said Nesti, he cut the transmission and turned to look at Taiyuya and Karen, knowing they wanted to say something. "You know, you two didn't have to remain silent during the whole transmission," Nesti said while he took apart his lightsaber and inspected the interworking. "Don't you find it a bit weird that everything is falling into your hands?" Karen asked while she was looking at her datapad. "Karen, I don't see why you're complaining about it. Means less work for us in the long run," Taiyuya said. "Normally yes it would, but Revan, Vitiate and Sasuke did say that they planned ahead in case they died before they could destroy the Republic, so you're worrying about nothing," Nesti said as he removed the lightsaber crystal that his former masters gave him and checking for any damage before putting the lightsaber back together. "On to more important matters. The ever so kind Duchess and what remains of her people have volunteered to be our test subjects for some of the more deadly experiments you've been working on, Project Sith Spawn and Project Necron to be exact," Nesti said with an evil smirk under his helmet. "You prepare the training room and get my other lightsaber," Nesti said before sitting down and meditating. Nesti's chambers 4 hours later. You walked back into the private quarters of Nesti to inform him that his victims were all in the training room and ready to die, not that they know that of course. Spotting the Sith Lord meditating on the floor, Taiyuya reached out to shake his shoulder when his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Are the Mandalorians in the training room?" Nesti asked, getting up and stretching the kinks out of his joints. "Yes, they're all there, 137 in total," the redhead answered. "Then why are we standing here when I have people to murder and planets to conquer?" With that said, he walked out of the chamber and walked to the training room with a grin that said, "I like to burn down orphanages," with a smile. Training room. The training room was about the same size as Nesti's chambers, but a little smaller and gray instead of black. There was a small one-way mirror to observe whoever was using the room. Behind the mirror was the control room of the room. The one using the console could control the training simulations and many other things that were irrelevant to what was about to happen. 137 Mandalorian, 90 men and 47 women have stood in front of Nesti, ready to attempt to take the title of Mandalore. On a side note, their armor is completely clean, show that they're shiny. "This is the so-called Sith Lord we're supposed to fight. We got this in the bag." The Mandalorian who was talking didn't get to finish as his head was cut off. "One down, 136 to go. Please do try to last longer than that fool," Nesti said in a taunting voice, trying to anger the Mandalorians. He didn't have to wait very long as 20 men charged him with vibroblades. "This is my first time writing a fight scene, so sorry in advance if it's bad." The Kesti decompressed the activation studs on his two lightsabers, igniting the red-centered blade and a black blade, then dropping into the Jerkai fighting stance. Not 10 seconds later he had to block a slash that would have decapitated him before retaliating by cutting the attacker's arm off at the elbow and using him as a meat shield. The Mandalorians were angered at the fact that the Sith Lord used their comrade as a meat shield. The Mandalorian's attention was brought back to the man that was impaled on the vibroblade when the man started to scream bloody murder as millions of volts of red and black lightning coursed through his body and up the blade of the blade he was impaled on, also electrocuting the blade's wielder, killing both of them. The remaining 18 Mandalorians were distracted by their comrades' deaths that they took their eyes off of Kesti, which was a big mistake. The Kesti sent a single arc of lightning at the Mandalorian closest to him. When the lightning entered the man's body, he used the force to amplify the lightning to a critical point, causing his victim to explode, sending lightning bolts onto the 18 Mandalorian, vaporizing them. The Kesti turned back to the 116 still living Mandalorian and motioned for them to come at him at once. Instead of charging the Kesti, they pull out their blasters and tried to shoot him. Tried. The Dark Lord disappeared in a burst of speed and 30 Mandalorians were eviscerated and another 60 were cut in half. And then there were 26. Which way should I kill you? I could rip your arms off, or I could use force lighting to melt your skin, or I could rip your minds apart. I think I will go with the first one. The scared shitless Mandalorian once again tried to shoot Kesti, but with a wave of his hand the blaster bolts were redirected so that they missed him. Click. 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 Multipliable clicks could be heard as all of the blaster's clips ran dry. The Mandalorians tried to reload, but they found that they couldn't even move. Using the force, Kesti sent their pain receptors into overdrive before walking over to the Mandalorians and looking over them. Kesti pointed to several of the Mandalorians and said, "I'll let you 7 be." Turning to the 19 that he didn't point to, he used the force to slowly pull their arms off. With their pain receptors in overdrive, the pain was increased by 2000-fold. The sound of joints being dislocated soon turned into the sound of skin being ripped, turned to blood splashing onto the floor, and the screams stopped as their hearts finally gave out. Turning to the 7 he decided not to kill. He grinned under his helmet. Kesti snapped his fingers and 7 shots rung, and the Mandalorians crumpled to the floor out cold. The two-way mirror began to part. Taiyuya, Javin, and HK-47 walked out of the control room. Observation. These meatbags are the worst excuses for Neo-Crusaders I have ever seen. With their numbers, they should have at least given you a small workout. Conclusion. I believe that they are either shinies or the worth of the Neo-Crusaders has diminished over time. Query. Master, can I whip the sorry excuses for Mandalorians into shape? I promise that I won't kill or permanently cripple them. HK said, getting a glare from Javin, who took offense to what HK-47 said, and Taiyuya cracking up laughing. With all due respect, those were shinies, otherwise they would have lasted longer, said, still glaring at HK. Offensive statement. People may get the wrong idea about your sexual preferences if you keep glaring at me. HK insulted. That's enough out of you two for now. You can continue your lover's quarrel in private. Javin, relay these coordinates to your fleet. You will be accompanying me and my fleet to Ilum. Kesti commanded, handing Javin a datachip with the coordinates, then walked out of the training room and heading to the bridge with Taiyuya. Corridor near the bridge. On their way to the bridge, Kesti and Taiyuya were talking about their next move. Why are we going to Ilum? We don't use green and blue crystals. We may not use them, but the GD do. So we're going to conquer the frozen wonderland to stop the GD hopefuls from building lightsabers. They're close, but no, we're going to stop the hopefuls from ever becoming GD. Normally only 10 hopefuls are taken at a time, but this time it's different. There are over 2,000 hopefuls in the cave and another 3,000 in orbit at this very moment. We're going to kill the hopefuls and prevent any more Padawans from being selected this year. Once again, no, we're going to capture as many hopefuls as we can and turn them to the dark side. Their convocation continued as they entered the bridge and even after entering hyperspace. 10 parsecs from Ilum. The Kesti's fleet dropped out of hyperspace 10 parsecs from Ilum to activate the fleet's cloaking devices, then re-entering hyperspace. Ilum. The frozen world of Ilum, 4th planet of the Ilum system and the location of the GD crystal caves. In orbit above the planet were about 200 GD training cruisers filled with GD hopefuls, 50 Valor-class cruisers and 100 Hammerhead-class cruisers. The Valor-class cruisers was 500 meters in length and had a bulbous center section, with gun batteries covering the front, sides and stern, 7 thrusters located on a ventral tower, and a command tower on the dorsal side. Lining the sides of each ship were several hangars. In addition, at least one hangar was located on the dorsal hull, facing the valley in the middle of the craft. The Valors and Hammerheads were guarding the GD hopefuls and the planet from nothing. The only reason the ships were there was to watch over the children. The crews of the starships hadn't been in a battle since Dark Hyperspace War, and they were hoping that something interesting happens. On the lead Valor-class cruiser, the Invective was either asleep or goofing off, neglecting to do the small but extremely important jobs, such as watching the radar or manning the turbolasers. If they would have seen the large blimp pop up on the radar, and they would have been able to return fire when said ship opened fire on the Invective. The turbolasers ripped through the Invective's hull like hot butter, causing the ship to explode. The explosion alerted the other ships that they were under attack. The crew of the ship scrambled to their positions, and the GD training cruisers moved behind the Valors and made a run to the other side of the planet to jump to hyperspace. Pride of the Sith Bridge. Master, the GD cruisers are moving to the other side of the planet to possibly make a jump to hyperspace, the Admiral HK reported. Activate the gravity well projectors and fire the ion pulsed cannon, then ready the boarding parties. Also jam their communications. Nesti commanded, standing up from his throne in the center of the bridge and walking to the viewport to observe the battle. Yes, Master, was the unanimous reply from the droids. GD training cruisers. The ships just cleared Ilum's gravity field and were about to enter hyperspace, but the ships jerked. The pilots all gave a collective cry of fuck before making a run for the GD temple on the planet. The pilots tried to hail the temple, but all they got was static. The younglings on board were panicking, and the GD knights over them were trying and failing to calm them down while directing them to the escape pods. They never noticed the ion pulse that was heading their way, but the hammerheads and valors closest to them did and moved to intercept the wave by acting as shields, but the pulse passed through them, leaving them dead in space, and continued toward the GD cruisers, also leaving them dead in space. Pride of the Sith vs Republic fleet 2 hours later. The battle was rapidly going downhill for the Republic fleet. That ion pulse disabled 30 valors and 10 hammerheads before they were torn apart by the Pride's turbolasers. Not even the combined firepower of all of the fleet could pierce the Pride's shields, which was sitting still, letting the ships fire on it. Bridge of the Pride of the Sith. The Nesti still looking out of the viewport, watching the Republic's vain attempts to destroy his ship with boredom. If this is all that the Republic has to offer in battle, then it won't even be entertaining crushing them, Nesti thought. The Nesti closed his eyes and began channeling large amounts of the dark side into a force push. Red smoke began to seep from under his eyelids before they snapped open, and he sent a wave of pure dark side energy in the form of a force push. The force push was so strong that it materialized as a wave of dark red energy that was heading for the Republic fleet. But the Republic fleet and the Ilum GD temple. Everybody in the Republic fleet and on Ilum felt the buildup of the dark side, but only the GD know what it was to the non-GD. It was just an very evil feeling that made them freeze. With Nesti on the Pride's bridge. The Nesti watched as the force push hit the fleet, sending the ships on a crash course to the planet's surface. Hey shithead, are you done playing with the Republic yet? We got a problem. Yuya asked via the mental link they shared. I just finished, and what did you do? The embalming matrix isn't working. I think we need more sacrifices. Use the new Mandalorians we captured if you need more life force for the embalming process. We did, but the damn thing won't work. Keep saying some shit about a chosen one or some shit. I'll be there shortly, Nesti thought before cutting the link. Javin handled the capture of the GD and the younglings, Nesti said, turning to Javin, who had been on the bridge since the Republic began firing on the ship. Yes, Mandalore, was the reply that Nesti likely ignored in favor of the reason why the embalming matrix wasn't working for Karen and Yuya. Karen's lab. Karen's labs, if you could even call it that. The lab was better suited to be a torture chamber with its sub-bed as. The room was very dimly lit and very big, with 6 tables where people or things could be strapped onto in the center of the room, hundreds of sharp and rusty knives on the walls, cages that were currently filled with new Mandalorians and was connected to the prison ward. And a large dark gray and green sarcophagus. The sarcophagus's top was decorated to look like a mix between robot and human skeleton. The sarcophagus was actually the Necrodermis embalming matrix Age of Fanfiction's OC, or the NEM for short. The NEM could be used to turn anything organic or inorganic by covering them in Necrodermis, turning the target into Necrons. The Necrons are a mysterious and hopefully extinct race of robotic skeletal warriors that have lain dormant in their stasis tombs for more than 60 million standard years and who are the soulless creations and former servants of the ancient Ctan, the terrible star gods of myth. The Necrons are ancient beyond reckoning, predating even the birth of the Celestials and the Force. The Necrodermis is the Xenos material created millions of years ago by the Necronter species that is often described as living metal. Literally, the name means corpse skin, from Greek 1/2 mu degrees a acuta and mu a acute 1/4 superscript 1a or dermis. It was originally used by the Necronter to construct their massive sublight starships that explored and settled the Milky Way galaxy millions of years ago. It was later adapted to create the robotic bodies possessed by the Ctan and inhabited by the Necronter after they agreed to have their consciousnesses transferred from their short-lived organic forms. This process transformed the Necronter into the undying Necrons. Necrodermis is a material of unknown origin and chemical or molecular structure that possesses the extraordinary ability to regenerate almost all damage instantaneously, flowing back together as if it were a liquid, while closing bullet holes, mending gashes and tears, or even reattaching severed pieces with little delay. The material is also adaptive in some unknown fashion and can learn to repair itself given enough time from nearly any form of damage, even a blast powerful enough to reduce it to its constituent molecules or atoms. In addition to the bodies of the C'tan and the Necrons themselves, all Necron vehicles and starships are made from Necrodermis, including monoliths and Gauss pylons. The Imperium's C'tan phase weapons are also crafted from Necrodermis. It should be noted that Necrodermis is not an alloy of other metals, but a fundamentally new material created by the Necronter. Necrodermis is unbelievably resilient and can absorb incredible amounts of damage and then reform all tears or punctures over a period of time. When activated, 4 openings on the sides of the NEM will appear and green Egyptian-like embalming jar-looking things will fly out and scan the target, then Matrix will open and a smoke-like swarm of black matter crackling with green lightning energy will come out and start necronifying the target and then return once it is complete. It uses a combination of a very advanced nanogene technology, an alchemic algorithm based on numbers and elements that don't technically exist in this plane of existence, a version of Meku Deruvidi that predates the Sith, Jedi, Rakata and even Celestials. The Matrix uses micro-precision scanners to beepize its target. Once it has a good enough understanding of everything there is to know, it will then construct a schematic of its Necron design. It is possible to add guidance commands on what it should try and include in the design. There are limits, but it will try to follow the commands as closely as possible, without compromising the design's overall ability to function, after which it will start to alchemically alter the target into Necrodermis, add Necron tech where it is needed, and possibly power up the new Necron creation. With Ta Yuya and Karen. The Ta Yuya was staring at the sarcophagus trying to make it activate, and Karen was holding a new Mandalorian's heart. Well, seeing someone holding a human heart is disturbing. The fact that it was still beating and the victim was still breathing was downright traumatizing. Many people would say that Karen was insane, but she was as sane as guy or girl. The thing that she does in her lab were because of necessity. But on the bright side, she wasn't like Lysana Strauss' Age of Fanfiction remodeled her to fit in the Star Wars universe. That woman has some problems. She drinks people's brain juice, even though she could survive by eating normal food, since she's half human half Anzid. But back on subject, Karen doesn't experiment on people for fun. Okay, maybe little fun. 10 minutes later. When Nesti walked into the lab, he saw Karen playing with some guy's heart literally, and Ta Yuya still trying to get the NEM to work. When she heard the door open and Nekesta's footfalls, she stopped what she was doing and was about to say something, but she was interrupted by the NEM saying, "What is thy bidding, C'tan? Do you see the cage of people over there? You are to consume their life force, and you will also be under the command of the 2 red heads," Nesti asked, pointing to the cage on the far right. "Yes, C'tan," NEM said. "Don't use all of the prisoners. I have further uses for them, and has there been any progress with the Sith Spawn project?" Nesti asked Karen, who was still holding her victim's still beating heart. 50% less survived the process than when we tried using Shinobi. "If you'll turn your attention to the cages," Karen said after putting the man's heart back in his chest and unsealing a staff that was brown in color, 1 meter in length and 4 centimeters in diameter, and it was crooked at one end, with a violet shining light at the other. Karen pointed the staff at the cage, and red smoky tendrils shot out of the light and wrapped around, and the cage began to turn the prisoners into raccoons. The prisoners began screaming as their bones broke, then repaired themselves, then breaking again and repairing themselves. The process only took a few minutes, but felt like an eternity for the now mindless raccoons. Where the 20 Mandalorians once stood, 10 raccoons stood in their place, and there were 10 mangled and disfigured bodies. As you can see, only half of the Mandalorians survived the process. Well, when we used ninjas, all of them survived the process and retained some of the former intelligence. This leads me to the conclusion that the Mandalorians' bodies and their minds might not be strong enough to handle the process. I've also hypostasized that with the Mer talisman should be able to make an intelligent raccoon. Or a better understanding of the raccoon anatomy, Karen explained to Nesti, who was listening to the possibly mad doctor. "So we need the Mer talisman or a fossil of a raccoon made by the talisman. Send out your HK units to find them. Mine are kind of busy right now," Nesti asked. "The talisman was lost over 1,000 years ago, and you and Ta Yuya are the only ones that know how to flow walk. And any information on it was destroyed during the attack on the GD temple, when your ever so wise master approved an attack on the GD temple," explained Karen with a twitching eye. A thought popped into Nesti's head. "Karen, you've just given me an ideal for what we'll do in 1 year and 2 months. Once we have enough manpower, we'll do what the old Sith Empire did and take back Korriban with and start a war with the Republic," Nesti said. Shithead, where are we going to get the manpower to launch a full-scale war against the Republic? Sure, we have an army of droids, but they're too easy to destroy. Sure, they're better than the battle droids the Trade Federation makes, but against a group of GD, it's like trying to escape a black hole. Pointless, Taiyuya said, finally joining the convocation now that they were talking about war. Taiyuya has a point. Naruto, an army of droids, has more cons than pros, and Empwave could send them offline. Plus, if the infotech has sent us is correct, then those ships were relics of the past. The Republic has newer, more up-to-date starships with state-of-the-art weapons and shields, better crew, and an army of highly trained Republic soldiers and clones, not that they know about the clones. Eren said, agreeing with Taiyuya. But you to forget that I'm the Mandalore. I have an army of Mandos, plus even you've sensed the millions if not billions of dark GD following the pride to swear allegiance to me or try kill me. Then there's the fact that Revan, Vitiate and Hidzuska, when they found out that the Republic was going to win the war, had their remaining forces put into cryo-sleep with the orders that whoever woke them up would be the new emperor. And finally, if you forgot, there's the Rakata and the countless planets we can conquer in the unknown regions and take over their armies, Nesti said, shutting the two redheads up. Now get back to work, Nesti yelled and walked out of the lab. Bridge. Nesti walked into the bridge and sat on his throne, his mind ablaze with thoughts of the many ways to get the last 2,000 younglings without killing too many of them. Wait, I don't even need the last 2,000. I'm from a planet of Force sensitives and my HK units are being necrophied, so I'll just use Taiyuya and Karen's. Nesti thought. Admiral, send down the holoprobes and have tech hack into the comm systems on all known Republic planets and in the GD Council chambers. Nesti ordered. Yes, Master, the droid said. All the droids doing as they were told, Nesti pressed a button on his throne and a holoprobe flew in front of him. 2 hours later. 2 hours had passed since Nesti ordered the holoprobes to be sent out and had tech hack into the comm systems of every Republic planet and the GD Council chambers. During the 2 hours, Javan had collected the younglings and GD knights that weren't killed. He did lose a lot of HK units, not a major loss, since the Starforge can replace all of the ones lost in a few minutes. He also captured the Ilum temple and is currently holding everybody in there hostage using a Salamiri to prevent them from using the Force. Admiral, is everything ready yet? Nesti asked. Yes, Master. Nesti sat in his throne and removed his helmet, placing it on the ground. GD Council Chambers, Coruscant GD Temple. The GD Masters were having a meeting about many different things when the holocom system activated, showing a blonde man in Mandalorian armor sitting on a throne in what looked to be the bridge of a ship. The GD were stunned that someone could hack into the comm systems. Mace Windu was about to yell at the man who dared to hack the GD High Council, but Yoda silenced him. Your name, might I have? Asked Yoda politely. I am Darth Nesti, apprentice of Darth Revan, Darth Vitiate, Darth Nihilus, Mark Aragno. Nesti let the names of his first four master names sank in. And Darth Hidzuska, the former Emperor's Wraith, the second Emperor, and the killer of Satel Shan, along with most of the GD High Council. Nesti said as he watched some of the High Council members pale. Yoda's eyebrows rose before he schooled his features. Didn't go through the trouble hacking our comm systems to introduce yourself. Reason for this intrusion? You must have him. Yoda asked. Yes, I almost forgot. You have some things that are mine and I want them back. I'm willing to do a trade, as I also have some things that belong to you as well. Nesti said with a smirk that was threatening to split his face and the eyes of a predator stalking its prey. Before Yoda or Mace could speak, the one of the unnamed members of the council decided he was tired of the Sith. Sith scum, I for one do no act. The unnamed GD was lifted out of his seat, grasping his neck, trying to remove the invisible hands that were holding his windpipe before he was sent out the window to plummet to his death, also causing the deaths of over 2,000 people. The council was shocked at the death of their fellow council member. Most of them were still looking at the hole in the window where the now dead council member sat. Well, now that he's out of the way, we can get back on subject. I want your forces out of all the systems that make up the former seat of the Empire, and anyone arrested on any of the planets in the former seat of the Empire be released from any Republic-controlled prison to Drahman Cass, no matter the crime. Nesti said, observing the reactions of the council members with amusement. This much better than blowing up a planet. I should do this more often. Nesti thought. And if we don't do what you ask? Mace Windu asked with a raised eyebrow. Hearing the question that he was waiting for, he switched the holofeed from his holoprobe to one of the ones inside the Ilum temple, showing the tied-up GD knights, younglings, ash piles that were once people that were shot with disruptor weapons, the corpses of dead knights and younglings, along with that didn't surrender when almost 200,000 droids stormed the temple. And droids with their blasters primed and ready to kill anyone that steps out of line. The GD Council members look at the image with looks ranging from horror, grief, sadness, and or disgust. Yoda shed tears for the lives of the fallen Jedi and younglings, and for the first time in over 500 years he spoke normally. Sith, I agree to your terms. Our fleets and armies will be removed, and the prisoners from the former seat of the Empire on one condition, Yoda bargained, ignoring the looks of shock he was getting. And that would be? Nesti asked. I ask that you make no attempts to attack any Republic planet, and we shall do the same. Yoda said. I also agree to your terms. After I've been informed that there aren't any Republic forces on my planets, I will remove my forces from Ilum and leave the system. Till next time, Grand Master, Nesti said before cutting the transmission. Once the transmission ended, the chambers were filled with shouts of outrage at the fact that Yoda agreed to the terms of the Sith. The Jedi were silenced when Yoda's force presence came crashing down on them. Have you all fallen so low that you value a few star systems over the lives of the ones who look up to all of you and aspire to be like you? This is not the Jedi Order I shed blood, sweat, and tears for over the course of my long life. I am disappointed at all of you. I will be going to the Senate building to arrange for the removal of the Republic's forces, Yoda said, while looking at everyone with looks of disappointment before he got out of his seat and leaving for the Senate building. Pride of the Sith Bridge, Ilum. Well, that went surprisingly well, Nesti said to his two red-haired partners in crime. Did you see the green toad? Cried Yuya said, barely restraining her laughter. This more than makes up for using my droids, Karen said before walking out of the bridge to break even more illegal experimentation on sentient being laws. Suo. What now? I believe it's nearing the time for us to return to Ibanez IV. My spies have told me that the elemental nations are preparing for war. One estimate that in the time it'll take us to get the army of revanites that Revan has stored on Ilum, go get the rest of the army stored throughout the former seat of the Empire, go to the Star Forge, have the Mandalorian ships upgraded, get back to Duxon. Announce myself as the Mandalore, kill some people, have a throne room built, assign the elite guard, kill some more people, then go back to the former seat of the Empire, play on the people's gratitude, have those who are willing to enlist in the army or navy, organize the awoken armies, get them up to date on what's happened since they were put in cryo, get them new armor and weapons. Organize the armies, have more ships built, making sure that the Dark Jedi and Sith know just how large the gap between their mastery of the Force and mine is, then conquer the planets in the Ibanez system, get the population of the planets out of the primitive stages of their civilization, head to Ibanez IV, Nesti said, stopping to make sure Yuya was still listening. Once he was sure that she was listening, he continued, once we've arrived we wait for the 3 Kages that aren't affiliated to me, wink wink, to start war with the Akutsuki and head out to the front lines, attack Konoha, Iwa, and Kumo. Once the villages are under our control, we meaning you, Karen, a shit ton of HK droids, and myself will attack Ami, kill the traitorous son of a Hutt Nagato, draw out Obito, then kill him, and draw out the Kages and kill them. You're leaving out something, shit-faced Yuya said. I am? Nesti asked, taking up a thinking pose. Nesti snapped his fingers and said, I got it, I need to have my HK's necrofeed. Yuya deadpans at what her master just said. No shit for brains, we need to start the search for the Mer talisman. Nesti throws a datapad at Yuya's face, which she caught before it could hit her. The fuck was that for? You could have handed me the fucking thing, Yuya said, getting ready to launch the datapad back at the blonde Dark Lord. Take that datapad to Karen's lab, and you two are to read the info that Tech has uncovered on the possible whereabouts of the talisman. Oh, and I want you and Karen ready to leave the Pride once we've landed on the planet. Now run along, we'll be planet side in an hour or so. Nesti said before turning his back to Yuya, who walked out of the bridge. 1 hour and 30 minutes later, location unknown, Ilum. It took the Pride of the Sith an hour to reach Ilum's surface and 30 minutes to reach the location of the hidden army. With Nesti, Yuya, Karen, and Javin at the bottom of the boarding ramp. It's fucking freezing out here, can you please open the base already? Yuya asked while hugging Karen for warmth, who was doing the same. I did say be ready to be planet side, common sense would say let me get my armor that has a heater installed instead of fur coats. Nesti said from the heated comfort of his armor, which he changed to a red and black version of his Neo Crusader armor, although there were a few minor differences, such as a black and cape with the Sith Reborn insignia in the center of the cape. The two redheads tried to run back into the ship to change into their armor, but Nesti grabbed the hoods of their coats and threw them in front of him. Their back hit something solid and gray, causing them to let out a moan of pain. Happy now there's the entrance. Revan should be on the other side unlocking the door, Nesti said, while trying not to laugh at the redhead on the ground holding their backs. As if on K, the blast door opened and Revan laughter could be heard echoing off the walls, which pissed of the redheads. Before they could possibly piss off the former Dark Lord and get themselves fucked up by Revan, Naruto calmed them down and told them to follow him. The halls of the base were a fading gray, with some parts of the walls being devoid of paint altogether. The walls were just big enough for the 3 Sith to walk side by side. At the end of the hallway was a turbolift that Nesti would assume would take them to where the revanite army was at. Once the three were on the turbolift, it began to descend at a slightly fast pace. After 20 minutes in the turbolift, it stopped suddenly with a jerk, causing its passengers to stumble. The doors of the turbolift opened and what they saw surprised even Nesti. He knew that the army was huge, but he didn't know it was this big. Ayuya and Karen were just as surprised as their master was. All they could do was stare, since they had never seen this many people in the same place at the same time. A shout of "Yes, Lord Revan" snapped Nesti out of his trance. He saw Revan floating in the air yelling out orders to Nesti's new army before pointing to him. The Revanites dropped to a knee for their new Dark Lord and said, "Hail Lord Nesti, the new Dark Lord of the Sith." If some of you are wondering why the Revanites are loyal to Nesti just like that, is because they worship Revan as if he were a god, and if Revan trained Nesti, then they would believe him to be a god. "Master, how many are in here?" Nesti asked his former master. 8 billion, give or take a couple billion, Revan answered, earning wide eyes from Naruto, Ayuya, and Karen. "Master, I don't think the Pride or the rest of the fleet for that matter will be able to carry this many people. You needn't worry about how to get out of here, Lord Nesti. This base also subs as a hangar." As soon as Revan said that, all the lights cut on, revealing that the very far back end was full of Interdictor class cruisers and Centurion class battlecruisers. Exactly how big is this base?" Nesti asked. Even with his enhanced vision he couldn't see the far side of the base. Revan shrugged, "I honestly don't not know. I found this base a few years after Vitiate killed me. I never really had the time to explore the base." Nesti nodded in understanding and looked at Ayuya and nodded. Ayuya stepped in front of Nesti and yelled, "Stand at attention, maggots." The army stood at attention, and Ayuya continued, "Everyone except the first through the 6 systems armies board your assigned ships and meet with the fleet in orbit, then wait for further orders." "Sir, yes sir," echoed throughout the base, along with the sound of billions of soldiers marching to their ships. There were about 1,385,530 Revanites left standing in front of the Sith Lords. "Revan, is there another way out of here, because I don't think this many people are going to fit in the turbolift?" Nesti asked. Revan pointed to the staircase next to the turbolift. Nesti, Ayuya, and Karen looked Revan like he grew another head. "You kidding, right?" The only response they got was a nod and Revan disappearing. Nesti turned to his new army and commanded them to meet him outside the base. He then turned and boarded the turbolift with Ayuya and Karen on his heels. One standard day later aboard the Pride of the Sith in orbit of Ilum. It took one full day to get the Revanite situated and remove the HK units from the GD temple on Ilum. He also had the HK pilots give them a crash course on how the ship works. Bridge. Nesti sat on his throne with Ayuya and Karen standing on either side of him, surrounded by Revanite starship pilots. The coordinates of the Starforge had just been relayed to the rest of the fleet and they were preparing to jump to hyperspace when Nesti felt a Republic fleet nearing Ilum. "Fuck, I didn't expect the Republic to get here so fast." Nesti thought, just barely repressing the urge to lash out at one of the Revanites. "Supreme Commander Skylray, is the fleet ready? Make the jump to hyperspace?" Nesti asked the newly promoted Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet. Skylray Rankoa was a fairly tall human female who stood at 5'8" with fair skin and red shoulder-length hair. She wore a jet black version of the Grand Admiral uniform with gold epaulets and the Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet rank insignia plaque. On her hips were 2 GSI-24D disruptor pistols that came from Nesti's personal armory. "Yes, and you seem troubled, my lord," answered Skylray. "The Republic fleet is about to drop out of hyperspace in a few minutes. Tell the rest of the fleet to jump to hyperspace," Nesti said through clenched teeth. "Yes, my lord," Skylray said before saluting and leaving to carry out her orders. "The Republic won't fuck this up for me," Nesti thought as his fleet entered hyperspace, and not a second too soon, since the Republic fleet dropped out of hyperspace. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.